This is Kenya's the number one opera in the world, according to Thorin. You're watching Thorin channel, that are also known as the number one existence fan in the world.
Right, this is another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is going to be Ocelote, or Carlos, as he prefers to be known as now, because he's not an actual player anymore. He's the owner of G2 Esports, obviously. So, Ocelote, if we start off in the realm of CSGO, it's actually a little bit of a contentious time to be a fan of G2 in CSGO, or someone who's a player for G2 actually, in terms of like, no one really knows where the squad's going, what the vision is at the moment. There's obviously been a lot of moves this year, a lot of turnover of players, and at the end of the year, bizarrely, it's kind of like an uncertain scenario, maybe even more so than earlier in the year. So if we wind back the clock, I want to ask this initial question. So coming out of last year, 2017, that was when the team had what was on paper dubbed like the French super team, because you got Kenny and Shox into a team at the first time, you know. It was like, in theory, all the better players that were in the French scene when the last shuffle happened, you know, like it looked on paper like, right, this is the lineup to try. And even though I know a lot of fans kind of derisively used that term, like French super team, because they said like the results didn't actually like sort of justify that. The reason the term was created is because the idea is when the team was created, it seemed like a super team. These seemed like the right players, you know, whether they made it or not, right? Were you someone, if we roll the clock back to earlier this year when we heard there was going to be roster moves, were you someone who looked at last year and thought last year's results were unacceptable? I mean, obviously there was a couple of championships in there, but, you know, at the majors, there wasn't any super deep finishes. There wasn't kind of a lot of consistency to the team. What do you think of last year's G2?
Yeah, last year has been 17, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So 2017, I mean, it always depends what's the angle you're looking at it from, right? Because if you are a tier 2 organization or tier 3 organization, then you would assume that that year was a huge success. But from our point of view, you know, everywhere you look at, in every game we're present, we make very clear plans to win, whatever the game that is. And especially if it's a game such as Counter-Strike, which for us is a, you know, easily top 3 game in terms of importance. So, of course, when we were thinking about putting together this super team and we were, you know, talking with the players and things like that, we always thought and had in mind that we wanted to win plenty of majors, you know? And we are not naive. We knew back then that, you know, you can't just pick up the best player or what I consider the best players from a single country and then expect to win everything. Because especially in Counter-Strike, team play is key, you know? And on the back of my head, I always had this, you know, Shox and MBK, will they get along thing. It was always on the back of my head before anything like this, you know, before the shuffle happened. However, if you look at the expectations that we had back then and how the year went, the year was a catastrophe because we really wanted to be in HLTV top 3 consistently throughout the whole year, you know, and that of course didn't happen. Now I'm assuming you will ask more questions in regards to the team, and I'm sure I'm gonna be able to give more kind of light in regards to all the thought processes that went to it and all that. But just to dumb it down to a single sentence, it was a catastrophe considering the expectations that we had.
Okay, so then coming into this year, people will remember that there was this bizarre scenario where on the one hand we heard, right, so Shox has to go and he has to get the surgery on his hand, you know, so he's going to be out of the lineup. And then somehow that's the moment when simultaneously the team had some sort of, like, it fractured internally, and then Shox wanted to go and make basically something similar to the team he made this year and was obviously using up until recently. And then NBK didn't want to do that, and so NBK wanted to try being the in-game leader, and then we saw you actually let NBK do that initially, and he kind of like got an experimental period where he could try this different lineup with Mixwell, people might remember, joined the team, and then that had, like, off the top of my head, maybe like 3 lands or something. Then that was kind of cancelled and we went into the other lineup. So first and foremost, like, take me through that angle. Like, how do you get to a situation where half the team wants to go one way, half the team wants the other way, and you're kind of the one having to choose which you do?
Right. So, first of all, it is very frustrating that in Counter-Strike, a culture where the power of the team is within the players has grown since many years ago. And I don't know any other game where this culture is as present. Just for context, we have absolute full control, or we had and have absolute full control over every team. However, Counter-Strike was always a problem because of the culture with which the teams were formed and the culture, this open marketness in terms of league organizers and things like that, which makes it so, organizations, especially years ago, had no leverage whatsoever. And as a result of that, all these, lineups being put together and essentially defining what the terms of the contracts are going to be and things like that, then arose. And then, after so many years where this culture, kept growing and growing and growing, then if you look back 3-4 years from today, you see a lot of examples of teams that almost imploded because the players had the full control over their teams. Sure. And there's a reason why every traditional sport, there's a reason why if it's a game where it's more than 1v1, you need an organization that backs their lineup, not only through, boot camps and whatever, content creation machine, whatever it is, but also to take the hard decisions that the players can't take. Players are biased, and that's the nature of a player. I've been a player myself. I was biased as fuck, I was, and I was the captain of the team as well, which makes it even worse, Sure. And I had a lot of power over my team because of how big my brand was. And now I realize how, now and many years ago, now that I'm the CEO of the company, I realize how bad that is, because it'll make undeniably the team worse over time, because there will be a moment in time in which you have to take a really tough decision that involves or may involve, that a friend of yours has to be kicked or you have to be kicked, and then emotions come into play. Sure. And that's where you lose track of what really matters, which is winning. Yes, it's very important that you make friends, but we're not in a reality TV show. We're not, building friendships only. This is the business of competition. So you gotta win, right? So now that I gave you the context of all this, which I think is self-explanatory, but now I'm gonna connect the dots. When I realized that there was a problem in the team, or when we all realized that there was a problem in the team that went beyond even in-game, disagreements, was far earlier actually than when this happened with Shox. But of course, you always try to fix things. There's always the next tournament. That's the beauty of sports, right? There's always tomorrow. There's always the next tournament. You can
people might remember, I actually believe it. I think it was even said in an interview that the team had even been considering roster moves before they won that DreamHack Masters Malmo, which was in last year, 2017. That it's like winning the tournament sort of temporarily made things fine again, right? And then it takes a long time before you address the underlying issue. Yeah,
there's 2 points to that. Point number one, it's true, there is a kind of false sense of security and false sense of, we're really good right now. Quite frankly, that tournament was nice, but it wasn't a major. So, it was a false sense of grandiosity, if that's a word. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Okay. Today I learned. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is, in that moment kind of made them feel as if, they were good or as good as they were supposed to be. But at the same time, winning the tournament also gave them a small sense of entitlement and a small sense of kind of, we already made it. Which, for a competitor at this level in a game like this, you just can't allow yourself to get to that point. Because you have all these other guys, 17, 18 years of age, 19 years of age, they just breathe Counter-Strike, And when you start, I'm going to take the morning off, I'm going to go this and that, and you start planning holidays and you start planning other stuff, you're an experienced Counter-Strike player for 10 years or whatever. I'm just making a case, and it probably happens in other teams, right? But then what happens is that you stop breathing Counter-Strike. You stop becoming the player that's obsessed with the game. You stop having dreams about you headshotting people. Just, when you're showering, you stop being in the shower for 45 minutes thinking about how you're going to open banana, And this is what happens when you're a player. And I remember the moment I stopped having these dreams, the moment I stopped having these visualizations, by default, with intrinsic motivation, is the moment I stopped becoming a good player myself. So this happens at some point in the careers. So I think what happens when that moment approaches, you have to shift your role, right? And sometimes the game allows you to be kind of more supportive and less flashy, but sometimes the game doesn't. In a game like Counter-Strike, even the support player has to hit headshots. Even the support player has to breathe the game. Like he sometimes carries. We see it in every team. And I think that's something that not everybody kind of understood. And in many times you'll find right now teams at the top or halfway through the rankings that will have players like those. And there's not much you can do to prevent it. You just have to either give it a full try and give a clear deadline, or just replace the player, because then the hunger is gone. So I think there was a little bit of that by the moment when we won DreamHack Malmo. Actually, a little bit of that. Perhaps also from the support staff. So just the team as a whole. And I think that led the team to a worse direction. After DreamHack Malmo, nothing went right. Just nothing went right. And you could see how they were just playing just to play, many of them. Not all of them, but many of them were just playing to play, and they didn't like each other as much in game. When you are set with, I don't like this guy, or I don't like the way we play, or, when you're set with that mindset, then it is really hard to get back on track if results are also negative. And it didn't matter what the support staff did. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter what they did. Sometimes you just need a harsh change. So on one side, I did not agree with changing the super team, because I was like, fuck my life. This team is unbelievable. We have to make this work somehow, I was already, interviewing sports psychologists around the world. I was just breaking my bones to try to make this work. But ultimately, the players defined between themselves, we can't keep going like this. We are losing the love for the game, and something has to change. So we had countless conversations about this. They had countless conversations about this, and they came to the conclusion that the best thing was to separate kind of MBK and Apex from, or Richard, just to separate from MBK and Apex, and also, Kenny as well. And, there was just many reasons why they took this decision, but which I'm not going to get into because it's too private, but they decided that way. So then we as an organization, we have not many options here, right? What do we do? Of course, I would love to keep the team as it is, but you can't force down their throats that they stay as it is.
Sure.
On top of that, you have the surgery of Richard, which is incredibly unfortunate, but thankfully, thank God, it came out very well, and he's hitting headshots again. So I'm very happy about that. So all these variables that we had in front of us, we had to take a decision, right? And first of all, I'm a big believer that, and this is also the case with employees with staff, right? I always like to give an opportunity that is tangible and has a clear deadline to everybody involved. And that's exactly what happened with what you can call the B team, right? Yes. Just for the sake of conversation.
Sure.
Which was MBK and Apex and Mixwell and yada yada yada. So what we agreed on was, let's try that out, and if it doesn't work out, and we spoke internally what it means that it doesn't work out. So it was very clear what they had to accomplish. Can you give us
any kind of insight into that? I mean, obviously,
yeah,
the players are gone, the lineup's finished.
Yeah,
it was like a clue to what they would have needed to have done.
Yeah, it was basically certain competitive results which were very realistic,
Right.
nothing out of the ordinary. And if those results would have been achieved, then there was a very high likeliness that we would have stayed with that team. And when I never 100%, because you have to agree on terms, you have to agree on many things, but that was going to be the direction. And it was like a trial period. So when the trial period ended, and it was clear to us that this team was not going to win a major, and it was not the core that it was clear we could be wrong, right? But in our mind, we thought this is not a team that can win a major. We really like them. And believe me, like MBK and Apex, those two guys are fucking amazing. Like you speak to them, they're just great people. In terms of marketing and branding, they're fucking amazing. They stream, they create content. Apex has fun so many times. Every time there's a tournament, there's a memes about him, which is great for brand awareness for G2, I love them. I really, really love them. But sometimes, again, you have to take these, you have to take the hard route. And the hard route in that case was to go with the team that we ended up going with. Now, there was a lot of flack, and there is a lot of flack towards the players and towards Richard and towards MBK and towards the organization and towards everybody. People just like to be outraged, and sometimes it is rightfully. But in this case, I believe that we all took the decision. Like nobody was being unreasonable here. The players couldn't get along with each other in and or outside the game. Sure. The organization had the variables at hand that we had, and we just did the best we could with what we had. Simple. And now it gets into kind of the team not the team that we currently have, but the team with Smith and Existence.
Okay, what about this then? So a question I have is, right, actually, considering you ended up with this really difficult situation where, the team wants to go two different directions, in a weird way, it actually ended up being sort of like, it kind of made the decision not as difficult that Shox had to go and do the surgery anyway and needed his recovery time. So actually the kind of time when he was off recovering was kind of an ideal time to do this other lineup and to be like, right,
it was like the path of least resistance.
Let's give you some set goals. And if you can do it in this period, then okay, you can continue. If not, then, we rethink what we're doing, because then Shox is a variable again. Whereas obviously he couldn't have played in this lineup anyway. The question is this: would you not have been worried that if the lineup with MBK had have worked, and let's say it had done amazingly, let's say they'd won a tournament or something, and you were like, right, I'm going to continue with this team, that means basically you would have had to potentially give away Shox, right? He might have been the player off in a new organization now doing something like, would that not a concern for you?
Yeah, this is like the lesser of two evils, right? You have to pick between the lesser of two evils, because for me, I would have kept the super team and just try to work something around it. Just change one player, perhaps. That's about it. Maybe get Existence for somebody. I don't know. In my mind, everything was fixable. But I was empathetic with the players, and I was like, okay, so this for them is a no-go. So then I had to go for option B, right? Which is, again, the option we went for. And you're absolutely right. At some point, if we would have need to go with the team with MBK and Apex, then that would have meant that we would have need to sell Shox and maybe even Kenny. Because Kenny Kenny wasn't also as keen as to, play with that team either. So you see all these different kind of dynamics. It was really complicated. And then you ask yourself, then you have fucking Kenny S, right? He may have gone good and bad years, but if you get this right, if you put together an environment for Kenny to thrive, he will 1v9. That's Kenny. Sure. So if you have Kenny under contract, you don't just give out Kenny, and I'm sure that many people would have taken the same decision. It was just very complicated. It was really very complicated, and I was looking with hopeful eyes the career of Zewo, actually, and I was always talking to our support staff about Zewo. Zewo. I keep reading about him. We should try it out. We should speak with him. We should try to get him. We should blah blah blah. And we never pulled the trigger, and I blame myself for not going even harder on that. Not getting Zewo is definitely something that I'm not very happy about, because you see the guy is just kicking ass. But on the other hand, taking that away from the equation, the fact that we didn't get Zewo into the mix, I'm relatively happy, or actually I'm happy with the decision we took, considering the very hard decision we had to make.
Okay. Right, I have a question that's got a little bit of a build-up here, okay, but it'll be one that you will understand the premise of very well. So there's a story I have actually told on a number of occasions, either when I'm talking specifically about SK Gaming, the organization, or when I've just been giving the analogy of how someone who's in a multi-gaming organization deals with games he doesn't follow as explicitly, like in depth. So for example, the contrast to this would be Jack from Cloud9 or Reginald from TSM, right? They came up through their game. That is their game. If it's about League of Legends, they're not just going to be like, oh, you know, I'll take everyone's advice. They themselves can have an opinion. No, it's their game. They have a sense of who they might want to see playing the team, who they think should be removed. They can kind of be informed as well as being the owner. But I know, for example, and the guy who you were working under, I was working under when I was at SK Gaming, Alex Muller, the Slash, when he would have to come to do one of these decisions, like I'm going to kick a player or I'm going to recruit a player, he basically once told me, like what I do is in each team, I have my guy. Like this is the guy where in the team, like he's the main person I communicate with. So often it would be the leader of the team, you know. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. In the CS team back when I was at SK Gaming, it was Roban, the guy who's actually coach of FaZe now. He was the in-game leader. And he also, even before he was the in-game leader, he'd been there many years. And so since he was a veteran, the logic that Alex had was like, if it comes to a tough decision and I have to choose between like two players, it's not like an obvious one, like everyone wants to kick this guy and everyone wants to get this guy. What I do is I go to my guy and I kind of like, he can kind of like give me the expert opinion as it was. And the notion was, in that sense, it's not just Alex who's deciding the team, someone else gets some input as well, but you've got a vision, you've got a clear vision in mind. Obviously, I'm guessing in the League of Legends team, you probably played a similar role. You know, you were one of the key pieces for many years. It seemed as though the players who came in and out were players that you kind of approved of, you know. Has it been something similar with you and Shox in this team? Because obviously he's been the main player who's remained the entire time the team's been in G2. So has Shox been someone who's been able to have that relationship with you in terms of like, not just a player, but if he tells you something, kind of like you're going to trust it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so. The challenge here was that there were two alpha males. I don't know if you can call them alpha males, but there were two alphas. There were two leaders in the team. The problem of having two leaders in the team is that you don't have, it's not quite as clear, you know? It's not as clear cut as it is if you have only one. In this case, it was MBK as well. So you have two guys that are considered leaders, that are considered alpha, so to say. Again, just for the sake of conversation.
Sure.
And you gotta cater to both of them because both of them have, goals around what they want the team to look like. Both of them have, very proactive and think very much a lot about what they want the team to look like. So you have to cater to both of them. And that is a challenge because when both of them have polar opposite views is when you run into the problem that we run ourselves. Ultimately, we ended up siding with Shox. I guess you can say it that way. Because I literally have another year and a half of experience with him. And I have come to realize that more often than not, trusting Shox is the right thing to do for the purpose of building a successful team. So ultimately, we went with Shox. Again, it's not the only variable, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons why. We knew each other for a lot of time. Also, he was going through the surgery, and I also wanted to give him a little bit of a vote of confidence after the surgery. It was, again, a combination of reasons, just very complicated, a lot of dynamics, but we ended up going with Shox, as you know.
Okay. Right, one thing about this lineup, okay, let's go like player by player as opposed to the entire lineup. So obviously one of the big moves, which people will remember, was announced in that interview you did with Shox when it was also announced that you'd give the MBK lineup a try and Shox was going to go and do surgery. In the interview, yes, in this interview, Shox said that if he got his chance in G2, he would make this team. And obviously the big news was he would bring back Existence, who at the time wasn't even playing, like he'd been kicked out of LDLC. And Shox's reason for doing so was a very interesting one, because for people who don't know, if you go back even something like I think 3 or 4 months before, I actually saw an interview in the French scene where someone asked Shox about Existence, and he said something along the lines of like, I've got a lot of respect for him, but like something along the lines of like, I wouldn't necessarily want to play with him again, or something like that. Like he tried to imply that I respect a lot that he dedicates his life life to the game and studying the game, but for what, obviously this is when Shox himself was an in-game leader, but the idea was like, my time playing with him is done. Yeah. What made it very interesting in this interview was Shox's reason for why he wanted Existence to come back was he said he himself had decided he didn't want to be an in-game leader anymore. Like it had taken away from his individual game. And he said when he looked at the French scene, they didn't have any true leaders. And so the thing he appreciated about Existence was he felt here was someone who's a true leader, like a captain, a guy who's going to be like, set up the game, set up the practice, make sure we do these things correctly. And the idea would be, Shox can just play again. He can just be a star player. We can be the Shox we remember. I assume this must have been an attractive idea to you. It sounded great on paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love Existence. I worked with him in the past as well. He was in G2 back in the day. And the reason he got replaced is pretty much around the same reason he got replaced, or not replaced, but replaced as a leader, in-game leader now, which was that his leading style in-game is very, how do you call that? Very organized.
Methodical.
Way too methodical, very organized, which in different meta games, maybe would have, maybe not, it definitely did work. But nowadays, Counter-Strike is a lot about being dynamic, is a lot about being flexible and reading the round halfway through the round, not with a plan at hand, because something may happen, a smoke may happen, and that changes your game, right? So what they realized back then and what they realize right now, and I'm not saying it's the right or the wrong thing, just what they thought, is that Existence leading in those moments, was improvable, and as a result, they thought that Richard could lead better in those moments. So, if I remember correctly, I don't want to misquote this situation, but I think we tried to speak with Existence about staying and leading the strat side of things, but then let Shox, Richard lead within the round.
Right.
And again, if I remember correctly, I hope I'm not wrong here, but I think that's the moment where Existence said that he doesn't like that, and that he sees himself as somebody who leads the team also within the round. So we did offer Existence the possibility to take care of the strats and to do the work outside of the game, and in game become a player, just one more player, or a how do you call that, like a support lead, a second lead, whatever it's called.
Yeah, secondary caller or something.
Yeah, and he didn't like the idea, so he decided against playing if that meant that he wouldn't be leading in full.
Okay.
So then, yeah. So it's a bit funky, the fact that Shox said that, and then he got Existence in, and then he got Existence on. But the team got Existence out. The team as a whole, because this was the team as a whole, not just him. But I think that this just goes to show how everybody's trying to how everybody's trying to find their ground. Everybody's trying to find who they really are and what they really want to become, and how they want to go around it. And the fact that a few months ago Shox was saying one thing and now he does a different thing is just a byproduct of him trying to look for the key to success.
Sure.
So I don't blame him, And it also, one thing that I learned from Richard is that he's very open-minded, and actually this is a common denominator in all our stars in every game. Actually, they are actually so open-minded that they can say right now, I believe in God, and tomorrow if they see facts that tell them otherwise, they will say openly, I don't believe in God. It will be for 24 hours between statements, and they will be fine with that. And I think there's a common denominator of winners actually, and Richard has that. So I applaud that on one hand. Again, I don't know if the right call was to keep Existence as full team leader, because I don't know enough about the game or not. But if 4, 5, 6 people are pretty much on the same page in regards to the same thing, chances are that they're gonna be right more often than not. So you gotta make bets, and that's what happened. Then the change of Existence for Jax happened, and yeah.
Okay, so obviously the other move, which in itself had a controversial element was that Smiths would come back to the team and he would play as an active player again. Obviously, he had been a player in G2 before and had been there as a coach, but obviously the situation in which he'd stopped being a pro player was kind of like, he was sick of criticism and his play hadn't been particularly good, and that's why he decided to go back to being a coach. So when this move happened, unlike the existence one, where there was some people in the community thought it's worth a trial, some people didn't, I have to say, this was one that almost overwhelmingly the public angle was like people didn't like it. Like people thought, because unfortunately it connects to another aspect which I want you to address in this, which is not only was it a player coming back that they didn't think was going to be good enough, but the implication was he's only coming back because Shox has the power to bring him back, because Shox is Shox and everyone knows you want to be associated with this guy. He's a winner. If he says something, you're going to give it a shot, But a lot of people felt as though basically the only reason Smiths gets back in this lineup is Shox wants him back. And then when they saw how it went this year, a lot of people would probably say they think they were right. It wasn't that great. It didn't turn out to be that great a lineup. He actually has ended up being removed anyway. And probably the harshest part, Ocelot, this doesn't make it look good, is that when Smiths got removed, when he did that twit longer, there wasn't even any sentiment in there of sort of like, no, I shouldn't have been removed. I was a really good player. He sort of even said himself, sort of like, yeah, I don't have the words in front of me, but the gist was sort of like he kind of agreed with it. He was sort of like, yeah, maybe it wasn't right for me to be a pro player. Yep. So what would you say to this angle? Like, first of all, if people are outsiders, was it just Shox who convinced you to bring Smiths back? Was it a bad move to make this lineup happen?
No, actually, you'd be surprised. Everybody was on board with having a more supportive player. But again, the fact that they are players doesn't mean they have the absolute truth. And many times those that come from outside and are not tunnel visioned into the game understand the basic truths. And the basic truths are something, maybe too simple, but many times, more often than not, they're correct. Which is, in Counter-Strike, you kill the enemy, you hit headshots, and they're dead. They can't kill you if you kill them first. Therefore, it's a very mechanically intensive game. You can't get away with having a dead weight, and I'm not calling Smith a dead weight, but just for the sake of conversation, you can't get away with having a dead weight that can't headshot at the level, regardless of what the position is. You just can't. So what happens is that if you intend to win majors, if you intend to put a team together that wins majors, you need everybody in the team to be, top 20 players in the world. Period. You can't get away with murder. You just can't. So what happened here, and what happened here is that the overall skill of the team, and again, this is my read on it, the overall skill of the team wasn't good enough, wasn't high enough to win those tournaments. You can, I have a theory, and many, every game is different. First 2-3 months of a team, you will see the truth of a team. I don't think you need to mesh together for a year. I don't think that's a thing. Your first few months, you will understand whether the team is going to go places or not. You will see.
I have a theory that I often tell people in Counter-Strike, just from my own observation, that like my usual number I give is I say like once you've played like 3 or 4 LANs, you pretty much know who that team is. Like the best case scenario is
that's even too many scenarios.
The idea is if you've played that many tournaments, you're not going to get twice as good. You've prepared. You've played a lot of different opponents. You had a few different chances. So maybe if you did badly one game, it evens out. But the odds on getting much better after that probably not that high. And I think actually, quite frankly, if you look at the lineups we're talking about, the results show it.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. And by the way, that is true for most games as well. I can't tell you a single game where that's not true. So I could see very early on that, Smith needs to ramp up still. He was a coach for a year, but how much time can you give? Time is ticking. So he knew that he was under pressure. And we knew that he knew he was under pressure. So it was a common understanding. It was mutual, understanding that, that at some point we probably could have to pull the trigger. And in this case, it was G2 that pulled the trigger, the organization. And it was actually the first time in the history of having the French team that we essentially said, okay, we think that we have to take over in regards to this decision. We need to change. We need a big change. And that included getting Jax and Lucky into the team. The organization. So it was actually the
organization. So it was the organization and presumably coaching staff, etc., more than the players who wanted this move to happen.
Yes, correct.
So the players would have kept the same lineup and just kept going to the next match?
I think at some point they would have. So here's the thing. Like, unless something really remarkably terrible happens, like a really bad discussion after a loss, or like something that burns bridges, it is really hard to make a change of this caliber between players that have known each other for so many years. It is really hard. Something really brutal has to happen. That's what I told you. That's why players can't have the control of a team. They just can't, because these things just, become the problem.
Well, I mean, the great thing about this is you see both angles of it. So before, when you had a lineup that on paper you want to keep, you can't because internally they're all fighting. And then when you have a lineup that, as the outsider, you also going like, this lineup isn't that good. They go, no, it's great, just leave it. Like, again, the players, if they have the choice, they'll make a decision sometimes opposite to you. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. And one of the issues or challenges of Counter-Strike is that you play so many games, so many maps, that at some point, one player will top frag. And then he may have a good game, right? And then you may judge the player on that one good game or that one good day. And that is the wrong approach. I am a big believer. It's just the simplicity many times wins. I am a big believer in just looking at the HLTV rating. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, it's not everything. And I agree with you, it's not everything. But the HLTV rating tells a lot about a player. It tells whether the player is able to pull up his weight even in a bad day. You see his consistency across different games. You see whether he tilts on LAN or not. You see many things. It's a very important kind of thing. And it is no coincidence that more often than not, the players that are replaced in any team happen to have a worse HLTV rating than the rest. Sure. Again, is the new age thinking of being a hipster, that you have to be like, oh no, HLTV ratings are not everything. Not everything is scoring goals. Well, it's not everything, but it's a damn big part of it.
Sure.
So yeah, all in all, we knew that Smith, and we gave a clear deadline as well, by the way. It was a clear deadline. And by that, but when the deadline was approaching, it was just very clear that this was not going to work. So we spoke with him, and it happened. He was incredibly gracious about it. He's a fantastic guy, incredibly good person. Yeah. So it hurt to do this, but we felt like it needed to be done. Now, did we hit the key? Did we hit, I guess, is what the next question comes. Do we think that we have the team that can win majors? You ask me right now, and I say, I don't know. But from what I know, which is not too much, okay? I don't know enough, nearly enough. I think I would say no. But I guess time will only tell.
Okay, right. On this particular lineup that you had just before you made this recent roster move, a question I've just alluded to, basically the characterization I'm going to give now. One of the really bizarre things about it is that one area Shox was entirely correct with is the idea of like, another reason he said that he wanted to bring existence in and he wanted to have like a real captain and change the team dynamic was because in the super team lineup, he saw that there was all these problems and things were never perfect ever. And there was always some people were either in bad form or some people were like disagreeing with the way things were done or waiting to see if they could make a change. That when he wanted to have a team where everyone's on the same page and there's like team harmony, basically all the things that have nothing to do with like inside the game. It's more like, the team environment and how we practice and stuff. Now, from everything I've heard, this is one of the interesting things. For a team that actually, again, if you look at the results, this lineup didn't do very well. Like they had maybe like one decent result. And even then, maybe not as good as you think. So you look at the results, they were fairly underwhelming. And for some of these players, they were very bad in the context of their careers, But the bizarre thing is, everything I ever heard internally was actually very good. Like, for example, even towards the end, they didn't seem like a team that was having like massive fights or something. They really did do the practice, for anyone who doesn't know. They did the boot camps, they did the scrims, they tried to do the strategies, they tried to implement everything. What would you say to that? Because, I mean, that's kind of bizarre in itself, right? There's all these French teams in history. They never get along. This one seems like the environment was good, but the play was terrible.
Yeah, the environment was good, I agree. But again, I think environment is a little bit, I mean, as in psychological environment is a little bit overrated in video game competition, at least. And in traditional sports, I know this to be the case factually. So having good mood between each other outside of the game, it helps more often than not if it's good, but it doesn't destroy the team more often than not if it's not perfect. So it's just a bonus, right? The way I think about training is that, and again, like 300 players have gone through G2. And if we count my professional career as a player, I don't know, maybe 360 players I've played with. I mean, I've dealt with in general. And I've come to realize one very clear thing. Many players around the world train 14 hours a day, play 14 hours a day, and they enjoy the game. Some of them cannot become professional players because their genes are just not good enough. That could happen, especially in a game that millions and millions of players played. Many of the players that don't reach the highest level, they don't reach the highest level not because they don't work hard enough, but because the attitude is not perfect. Attitude is everything.
Okay.
And when you go into boot camp and when you really train very hard and you're like doing deathmatch very often and etc., it's not the fact that you're doing deathmatch. It's how you're doing deathmatch that matters. It's not the fact that you're screaming. Everybody's screaming. Probably as many hours, everybody's screaming the same amount of hours, approximately. It's about how you take those screams. How seriously do you take them? How much do you focus on learning? How proactive are you in voice comms? Are you taking it like the closest possible to an official game? How much information are you giving out? How much are you feeling the stakes in a scrim? The attitude, in my eyes, is the most important thing. And I don't think that the attitude was perfect, because if it was perfect, then it would have shown in official results, more often at least. Is when you're back at home, when you're having that extra hour free, what do you do with that hour? Are you thinking Counter-Strike? Are you playing Counter-Strike? Are you watching things? Are you watching a tournament, or are you just playing God of War or whatever the fuck it is? And I don't know if any player play God of War, but it's again for a conversation. Or are you just outside just eating an ice cream? And you see these young guys, and Lucky and Jax are exactly this type of guys, actually. And I know Jax is older, but they're watching, like they're communicating in WhatsApp and watching tournaments. Like, have you seen that shit or whatever? They comment, they team speak, whatever it is, and they comment the game that's being played by other two teams. They breathe Counter-Strike. This is what ultimately will make up for a winning team, that everybody breathes the game. And of course, on top of that they're just very good at the game, of course. But if you lack either good genes or you lack good attitude, well, that will disqualify you to be a winning team. So to answer your question, or I don't know if it was a question, but to comment on that, I think that the overall attitude could have potentially been better, but I don't think that's the reason why we didn't perform. I think just the team just wasn't good enough.
So one aspect, and this is something where, so for example, since people know I'm a great admirer of Existence's career, people will know I was a player, someone who hoped that this could be a good lineup. But one of the reasons I even said from day one when I heard this lineup get made was, okay, I also had my skepticism. For example, if you have someone like Existence and you have Smiths come out of retirement, if you have these players, you might have a firepower problem in the team, something that I think most people would acknowledge at the end was an issue. But one of the problems I had was the angle I said that could have offset it was, yeah, but you have Shox and Ken. Like, if these two players get to the level that we know they have in the past, and this isn't like, saying now, like, oh, what if Get Right was as good he was 5 years ago? No, we're talking about even just a year or two ago. These are players who repeatedly have gotten to the top, and even if they have, 6 months where they're not that good, they can come back. They've just done it so many times. If you'd have gone back to the end of 2016, that year where the team was pretty good and Shox was like the star player and he was having all these amazing individual performances, if you'd have said at the end of that year that G2 will have 2 years coming up where Kenny S and Shox play together, people would be like, holy shit, I'm so excited. This is going to be amazing. These guys are going to tear it up. And obviously in neither lineup did they ever both kind of get this kind of star status. You know, they were never both on that level that you would want to see if you were the fan. Like if you were making this as like the movie with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone, you know, you wouldn't want to watch the movie and then Sylvester Stallone just plays some like fucking like PA who brings him a coffee at the beginning of the movie and then walks out. Like where was he? I thought
that's the worst fucking analogy.
You know, it's the best analogy. Like where was that guy? I thought these both guys were in the movie. You know, like it must be a bit bittersweet looking back on these 2 years now, and that just never worked out.
Yeah, it definitely was. It's like you say, you're putting literally Tom Cruise and Will Smith in the same movie, you know, and it is not working out, or hasn't worked out to the level that you wanted it to work out. Now our hope and hope is I hate that word. Our goal is that it ends up working out, and that's why we're trying everything, as you can see, around these two players to make it work, because it has to work. It's Shox and Kenny. It has to work. That's what everybody else is expecting and wanting to happen. So we're on the same page.
Right. Here's a question that is one that's a purely hypothetical one. So one of the things that also upset some of the people, I think is a reason why people were very harsh about the last G2 lineup, is not just because it wasn't doing very well and it had players like Existences Smiths who, you know, at different times the community's been very critical of, but more importantly, it meant that Apex and NBK were sat on the bench, they weren't playing for anyone for months and months, and then obviously with the way that news is reported, people heard these reports like Cloud9 maybe is looking into NBK. I think people know by now, Mouse Sports, for example, was interested in Apex. You know, there was lineups that were out there inquiring about these players, lineups that needed players potentially, maybe even needed players just like these. Was it from the G2 side of things? Is there a reason these players never got sold at that time? And it wasn't until the Vitality lineup they left. Like, for example, was there a part of you was thinking, these are like an insurance policy. Like, let's see if this lineup works out this time, and then maybe I can put one of the players back in. Or, you know, the major's coming up. Maybe one of the players I'll swap in or out. Was this actually part of the reasoning, or would you actually have sold these players if people had given you a good offer?
Yeah, so we would have sold the players if a good offer would come, and a good offer, a reasonable offer, not even a reasonable offer, just a fair, not even fair, just a decent. Somewhat
decent. You know, the problem
offer.
there is people heard that quote of like, you know, the buyout's 800,000.
I have no idea.
They think that I meant you had to give 800,000,
no
right?
fucking idea where that thing came from. Okay? I have no idea. And on the other hand, I mean, I've probably transferred 70 players in my life, maybe, like buy and sell, maybe more than that. Like, you know, when I negotiate or when everybody negotiates, the fuck? Like, you just negotiate. Like, what is, you know, it's a negotiation. The word is self-explanatory. So when anybody goes and try and wants any of our players and they're on the market, then I want to make sure they're sold at a market price, a fair market price, right? And if it's not possible to be sold at fair market price because nobody wants them or not many teams want them, then you lower the price. And then you lower it until the point where they go for free, you know? That's the way it works, right? And at no point do we want to keep them under contract. I've never done that to a player, and you never say never because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I very well know that it's very low chances that this ever happened. That there would have to be something really unexpectedly, I mean, I expected that I can't wrap my head around right now for me to do something like that. There's no value for me. They're still on a payroll. I have to pay them. I'm losing money. They're not playing for me. So why would I keep them? You know, people have to sometimes, again, the truth many times is the very simple answer, you know, the very simple answer is what is the incentive for a team to keep a player for years under payroll if you can't use him? And it was very clear that we couldn't use any of both because the team that we chose just did not want to play with them, and vice versa, I guess. So, yeah, honestly, I hate commenting on rumors because they're either isolated in context. Everything is out of context. I have no idea where they read stuff from or where they got this information from. A party that intends to buy a player and intends to put pressure in order to get the player will very often, and I have seen this many times, leak some news, even if wrong, purposely in order to get the upper hand. So because the player becomes gets nervous, and then the player asks, "Why is this true? Is this not true?" And then you're in a defensive position because you have to defend yourself, right? This is a very known strategy in player trades, and it happens in traditional sports too. So let's not comment on rumors. I like facts. I hate abstract shit, you know?
Okay.
I like facts, and the fact is that they ended up getting sold out for what everybody considered to be a fair price.
One of the aspects of this lineup, you alluded to it earlier, as to why this player change was made, wasn't just the players, wasn't just G2, it's that there's a coaching staff now. Obviously, you brought in Malek to be the coach a few months ago.
I like Malek, by the way. Great guy.
Is this a move where, because when he got brought in, some people might cynically have said, oh, well, like, this is a move, by the way, that actually some orgs will do, where, like, if the players don't want to make a change, but you've got to do something because fans don't like that you're losing, you say, right, get a coach, because, you know, we can say that we've done something that gives us a few more months. Well, we're working with our new coach now. He has to implement a lot of things. Sounds as though you're actually giving Malek, like, some level of control, right? If you
100%
recommend some of the players that are coming in, some of the cuts. So how has this shifted kind of what the plan is going forwards? Yeah,
so we are just going to use the same system that we use in other games with success. Again, we have 12 teams right now. All 12 teams except Counter-Strike are kicking ass. That's no coincidence, you know? And we have full control over the 11 teams. Now is when in Counter-Strike, the players realize that this is the case. So we now have full control over the team. So there's a support staff that now has a say. We have both Niak and Malek who follow the team daily and know what's missing and know what's wrong, what's right. Simultaneously, we use the help of Shox and pretty much every other player, but especially Shox, to get guidance on the feeling, right, of how the team feels in game and things like that. And ultimately, you have Jamie and Danny, which are head of talent and head of gaming operations in G2, as well as myself, to take the final decision. And that has been the case ever since Jax and, the moment we decided to bring in Jax and Lucky.
So if people know the context behind a lot of the things we've discussed here have been problems that have existed long before G2. These have been problems of the French scene where the players decided all the roster moves. If you
I have no idea what's up with this French. The French mafia, man. The fuck is going on? It's again, it's competition. Just go in game and just get together with the best players and make it work. It's not that complicated, you know. But yeah, it's the French culture. It's a very emotional culture as well. It is what it is.
Obviously with this,
my wife's French and son as well is French, so I know what I'm talking about.
Does this mean though that you have to stay committed to the French scene? Like, have you actually ever suggested to the players or been open to the idea of like, why don't we go an international route? Why don't
yes,
we bring
I did.
Some players
I did
elsewhere?
Plenty of times, and I hope one day they say let's do this, you know, because I built the first successful international team, and that is factual. There were other international teams before in Counter-Strike, but not as successful as G2 was with Dennis, Rain, Makelele, Fox, and who else? And AZ. Well, JKM was before. Yeah. JKM, and I loved every second of building that team, you know, because it was, man, this is mathematics. You have access to a bigger pool of talent, you know, and when you have access to a bigger pool of talent, then you undeniably will have access to better players more often than not. And the downside of this is international teams tend to have communication problems because English is not native language. and in Counter-Strike, this is super important. So I think there's a chance that I'm wrong in pushing for an international team or having pushed in the past for an international team. There's a chance I'm wrong, but what I have seen with G2 back in the day, when we got this international team together, just picking up players, I was buying them here and there, and it was also very fun for me. I saw that it worked. So maybe Counter-Strike is right now in a position where international teams are just very, very hard to pull, that they become a legacy team, just like Astralis is today. But because actually, if you think about it, like FaZe Clan, Mouse Sports, like all these teams, English-speaking teams, they are successful, but it's not a legendary team, you know? So there hasn't been a single time where an international team, English-speaking international team, just broke records, right? So I don't know if this is the right call, actually. I don't know enough to give you an answer. But I honestly, from an organization standpoint, it's always best if you have an international team because you cater to many different countries, and that in terms of branding is really good, and in terms of building a fan base is really, really good. And if they win, even better. But I do think that closing yourself to a single region definitely has cons. And that is that the amount of people available is just many times not that great.
In line with what you said earlier, are we to take it that this current lineup of G2 also has, like, you know, a time frame and sort of some set expectations? And if they, obviously, you know, could tell us what they specifically are, but like if they accomplish X performances, then, you know, they continue. Otherwise, you review it again and then players move. Is there like a system like this in place for the current lineup?
No, not in the sense of this is the deadline and this is the goals. These are the goals. But yes, in the sense of there's a constant feedback loop, constant feedback between each player and the support staff and also the organization. So all the players that know they need to play better, know that they need to play better and that they're being looked at very closely. So that is a position that, by the way, no French team has ever had in 3-4 years. Like no player was being told before the fact, hey, you have to improve because we're looking at this. Like this has to be better, you know? So for the first time, the players know what's going on in their careers. They can adapt accordingly. They can spend, you know, some of our players, by the way, are spending money on their own personal coaches for, you know, they spend time with them in game and they pay for that themselves, by the way. Like they, you know, so this is a different shift in mentality. And right now we are sowing, and hopefully in the future we can reap the benefits of what's going on at the moment in the team. For the first time, I am content. I'm not content. Actually, content is the right word. I'm satisfied with the type of structure, system, and work structure, essentially, right, that we have in the team.
So a few months ago, there was some news that said that some of the players in the team had signed new contracts, had re-signed with the organization for a few years. And the detail of the news that everyone was surprised by was it said that Kenny S was the one player that didn't choose to sign a new contract to go forwards. And obviously people from outside, since the results of the team wasn't very good, started speculating, like, you know, does this mean he wants to leave? Or is he being cynical and he's sort of thinking like, well, I'll wait and see until my contract ends, you know, where I am? Because again, as you said before, I mean, whenever it's Shox or Kenny S, like for people who are newer fans, like that alone is justification as to why these guys can kind of behave a little bit differently to other people, because everyone in the scene looks and sees the name and goes, it's Kenny S. Like, of course you'd want to play with this guy, or of course this guy will be a guy that people will build teams around at some point in his career. So can you give us any insight into that? Like why did the whole team not just sign again, and what went on there?
Yeah, again, this is out of a rumor. It becomes out of proportion. People make assumptions, and then, you know, people start thinking, oh, it's because he doesn't like the team, whatever, you know. And I can't get into the details of it, but it's all noise. Kenny will be with us for a long time.
Okay, right. Before we wrap up the CS:GO part, and obviously there'll be a different interview that's about League of Legends, What would you say as a final message to people who are fans of the G2 CSGO team? Because obviously this year, one of the differences in the past is you have been very vocal yourself on Twitter. In fact, some people, I saw some pro players even got a bit upset when you made that tweet where it was sort of like, these results are unacceptable. Like, I promise we'll change things. Some players thought, maybe you shouldn't put pressure on the team publicly like that. What would your message be for people who have followed G2 for a long time and have been underwhelmed by some of the last lineups?
Yeah, I mean, I you know me for many years now, and one thing is that I've come to learn over the years that you gotta be as transparent as humanly possible, first of all, and have as much fun as humanly possible as well. And I do both, I think, really well. So, when I made that tweet, there was backlash from some people in the community, which honestly I don't care about. I really can't care less. I'm not always right. I don't know if that tweet is right or wrong, but it's the way I am, and I embrace it. And it has worked for me over for the last 14 years. Comparatively successful player in 2 different games, and now leading one of the best organizations on earth. So I think it's working. But internally, that actually had a lot of positive impact, actually. That tweet had a lot of positive impact. Everybody realized, oh shit, we are actually held accountable, Shit, like, we have to win, It's not like we're getting paid, whatever it is, $500,000 a year or whatever. And we can just chill. No, there's no chill. You can get kicked. Everybody can get kicked, And that should be the case. And all of you players want everybody in your team to be able to get kicked, because you want your players around you to be the best they can be. And if they can't be the best, then they have to be replaced, because otherwise they're damaging you and the rest of the teammates. And that's something that the players understood out of that tweet. We had a follow-up meeting in New York. It was 1 hour and a half or something like that meeting, which we recorded with sound and everything, but we decided not to upload it.
Well, for what reason? Would be pretty interesting.
We recorded it mostly for internal use to know exactly what was spoken. But then at some point we toyed with the idea of releasing the content, but some players were not happy with that, so we were okay with that. It would have been great because I like full transparency and people would have seen what it is like, the background of an esports team when things don't go well. The kind of content I also like. It's very candid. But because not everything was nice, it was discussions involved, and I was getting mad at some point, which I'm never mad. I'm always making jokes and shit like that, but there I was mad at some point, and then they I remember there was a discussion with Edward, and I was saying, like, you have to be better, this is factual nowadays in Counter-Strike, And he was saying, yeah, man, but I was a coach for a year. And I said, yeah, that's the point, right? I totally understand where you're coming from, but you still have to be better, And I'm holding accountable the whole team for a certain competitive success and holding you guys to very high standards. And what happens then is that if those standards are not nowhere near met, then we have to do something. And these conversations are hard to have, but they must be had. So that tweet evoked an internal conversation discussion that I think was really, really good for every player, actually. They understood their career. They understood that, the reason why they are Counter-Strike players. They understood what their job is. And they understood that money is a bonus, that they should actually breathe the game at all times. So now what would I tell to the fans that, for the G2 fans in Counter-Strike, if we have any left after this catastrophic 2 years, we do. You're great guys. For the first time, I'm actually seeing a shift in the way we work, in the way we think about the game, and in the overall energy of the team. I'm seeing players investing in themselves, not only resources, but also more time. I'm seeing everybody just caring more about their job. At the end of the day, this is a job. And I'm seeing that the support staff have increased their level of ambition in regards to competitive results. The players have done the same. They were here in Abu Dhabi playing this funnel. They lost against Fnatic, and I'm pretty sure everybody's really angry right now, and that's a good thing because the tournament is a tier 2, tier 3 tournament, whatever. There's only one known team, which was Fnatic, and we shouldn't have lost against them. So everybody knows this, and that's something that makes me happy because it's the first step. Now I don't know if the lineup will stay the way it is today, because I'm not an oracle, but I know for certain that the core of the team is now set, and everybody understands what their job is. The culture is the right one, and it's a matter of time until good results come.
This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my upcoming content? Perhaps you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Do you want to see some teasers? See who's going to be the next guest on one of my shows? Maybe you want to take part in an esports discussion with me. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.